Hello everybody, here I am today in a labyrinth, and this labyrinth was lovingly created by Wayne and Sue, good friends of mine, and they marked it out and they planted little trees, little willow saplings, little willow sticks actually, and what happened is over the years the trees have grown to this size. So this is my opportunity to talk to you about stories. And as we walk into the labyrinth, what we have the opportunity to do is to focus on the old story. This is a story that people tell themselves about their lives. So this is the first stage in the shamanic process which I'm taking you through now. And you begin by telling your story of yourself, and you can do this by writing it down or making a film, posting a series of films on YouTube, whatever method you like to use. And by telling your old story, the story that you know about yourself, this is a very powerful thing to do. It's so powerful it actually has the ability to cause you to enter into a trance state. It's even so powerful, if you tell this story to many other people, you will actually enroll them in the trance state as well. So I'm letting out a really valuable bit of information here. And this is seen in its most extreme form by someone who has a severe illness. And what they do is they go around talking to the people they know about their illness in great detail. And the more they do this, the more they solidify the illness into existence and strengthen it and make it more and more intractable until you can use the word about it, which is chronic. And this is all the things that we can do by telling this story, the old story about ourselves and our lives. So this is represented in the labyrinth by our walk into the labyrinth. So our walk into the labyrinth is our possibility that we can take hold of, where we actually let go of the old story. And the way that you can do it is by telling it to yourself, writing it down, whatever you like. Only there's a difference, because what you are doing is you're being conscious, and rather than just repeating the story willy-nilly to all and sundry, you're doing it with a specific intention of letting it go. So the people normally tell their stories about themselves. This is actually the opposite. It's holding on and reinforcing and solidifying and making into an impregnable fortress. That's what people usually do. And this goes to such an extent people can become so identified with their illness that they can become angry and violent if anyone was to make any attempt to free them from this illness. Pretty serious when you think about the implications of that. For people with chronic illness, they tend to defend the illness to their last breath, often literally, which is why we get a terminal illness. So this is a completely different exercise we're involved in here. So as we're telling our story of our suffering life, as we go into the labyrinth, what we're doing is preparing to let it go and letting the words come out for the last time, until eventually we arrive at the middle of the labyrinth. And here you can see the centre. And what I will do is I will sit down and I will make myself a little smoke here, just to celebrate that what I've been doing in my walk into this labyrinth has been telling my old story with a very specific intention to let it go. And now I have this time in the in-between state. I'm not telling the old story. I've finished doing that. I'm preparing to tell the new story, which is incredibly exciting. So I'm just going to give you one little fragment of the old story, and this is actually one that my mother told me about myself, so I didn't even know it, because it was about the first year of my life. So in the first year of my life I was living mostly in a pram in a field which was a plum orchard full of plum trees, and my mum was looking after my dad, who had 6 months to live because he has an incurable illness. So that was a story that had been told about himself. by the doctors and himself, and miraculously that story became untrue, and he actually lived until he was 80, so that story did not stick. However, the story my mum was telling me is that I would spend most of my time in the pram, under the plum tree in the plum orchard, and they did all the things they needed to do to look after me, like give me food, change the nappy and all the rest of it, but mostly, and it was the fashion in those times, babies were supposed to spend their time outside in the wild. That was supposed to be a good thing to do with your baby at that time. So I had very little human contact, and this is a story that my mother told me about this very isolated babyhood that I had. And I believed this story, and I took it on, and I swallowed it, and I made it a part of me. So it's a little fragment of the old story that I'm telling you. So now I've sat in the middle, I've had my little smoke, now it's time for me to get up and to step out. So I actually did this process before when I was on retreat. So having told the old story and having written it down in detail, I then stopped, just like I did just now, and I prepared to tell my new story. And it began in the same way, because I wrote, I'm in a plum orchard in a pram, and there's a plum tree above me. So I was describing exactly the same scene as my mother described it many times as I was growing up. Only because I was telling a new story of my life, something miraculous happened. I was provided with new information, things I had no idea about myself. So now here I'm walking out of the labyrinth as I'm telling you my new story. So here I am walking out of the labyrinth, walking in the other direction, and this is what I was given. And the words just poured out of the pen onto the paper, and they were a great surprise to me. I had a memory, which I had obviously forgotten, of my mother saying that sometimes they would go out of the caravan and see me, their baby, in the pram, and they would watch as a plum dropped onto my head, and I would look up and laugh. And I found it as a great entertainment as a baby when plums dropped on my head. And the words continued to pour onto the paper. And what I realized is, in the first year of my life, I was given the incalculable great gift of having a very deep connection with nature and the relationship with the spirits of the plum trees. So every plant, whether it's a pea or a plum or a peach or a rose, each particular kind of plant has got its own diva. This is its own guiding intelligence, which actually gives it form and brings it into being. So in the 3D reality, there's a rose bush, but in the more subtle multidimensional realms, there are these beings that are actually creating the rose and bringing it into life and into being. So these were the beings that I was communicating with as a tiny baby. So actually I had the most amazing plant spirit medicinal education, which began from my earliest days when I was put out into this pram under the plum tree. And it was the plum trees with which I had the strongest connection. And so when the plum tree diva allowed the plum to drop from the plant and to fall onto my head, to me it was a great game, and it was a beautiful connection. So what I'm doing here is I'm showing you, as I'm walking out the labyrinth, you can take an exact little piece of information from the old story, but by having done this, telling the old story with the intention to let it go, having you pause and now preparing to tell the new story, because you've intended to tell this new story, new information comes out that you didn't otherwise realize. So I completely reframed the first year of my life from, oh, it's such a tale of woe, oh, it was so sad, I was on my own so much, to I had the most incredible babyhood, because I had this beautiful dynamic connection with the spirits of the plum trees that afforded me great pleasure and mirth. So this is what we can do. So we can turn, no matter what a tale of woe your story might have been, the old story, when you begin to tell your new story, you reframe it and you access information and aspects about your existence that you never knew before. And this is an extraordinarily powerful shamanic process, and it's a step towards the most wonderful process of all, which is called dreaming the world into being. But that's for another time. The important thing is, as I continue to walk out of this labyrinth, for you to realize that you have the power, through the intention, to tell your old story for the last time, to pause, just like I did in the labyrinth in the centre, and then with a pen in the hand, or with a microphone in the hands, or looking at the camera, and just being open, you tell this new story of yourself and your life. And in so doing, the old story is banished. And there's a little detail I didn't speak about earlier, because if you wish to banish, what you do is you turn anti-clockwise. So you can do that through walking a labyrinth, you can do that through so many means. You can simply stand on one spot and spin anti-clockwise 3 times. And this is something we do in the floral bath, the subject of another film. And that's what happens. You turn and you turn and you turn. As you turn anti-clockwise, you banish, which means you let go of the past. And you pause. And you turn clockwise, or you exit out of the labyrinth, and then you draw in the new possibilities for yourself in your life. And because you have the imagination, it's your story. You can make it anything you want. And it just begins with the original information, and with your dynamic imagination it becomes a story of the hero's quest, because every human being that's alive is a hero or a heroine. And when you tell your new story of yourself and your life, you start to discover that. So I'm the hero, because in my babyhood I did something that most human beings don't ever get to do. I had a really intimate, deep relationship with the spirits of the plants, which prepared me for the work I would do as a shaman years later, about which I knew nothing, but I was prepared and primed even in those times. They have a way of talking about this in politics. When they talk about spin doctors, there's an event, you put a new spin on it, so that's used in a way to manipulate people. Well, here's a really interesting thing about the word manipulation. Manipulation actually means to move with a hand, which means to make a change. So you can look at the positive sense of the word, which is when you tell your new story about yourself and your life, it is the hero's quest. It is you becoming empowered, becoming dynamic, creative, and accessing your imagination, and realizing that we are all gods and goddesses in the making. And as you know from the film, from shit into gold, the very worst experiences have got the seeds and the germs of the most exciting transformations. So, as I complete my journey out of the labyrinth, these are the words I want to leave you with. Remember, whenever you're ready, you can tell your old story of yourself and your life for the last time, with the intention to let it go. Take a pause, and then be as imaginative and exciting as you like, as you praise the hero and the heroine that is you, the god, the goddess in the making. All the love to you.